What is up, people, fellows, ladies, gentlemen? It's Spoot from Fort Misery Gaming. We are doing Sinoalice. So today, Gran Colo's coming up. We already had a video kind of on the vagueness of the shop. Just as a reminder, we don't really know how that's going to finalize because while the numbers are probably going to be the same, we try not to make assumptions because things can change. So, we figured we'd put together a quick little Coliseum video that I guess actually applies to Gran Colo anyway, because the tips are pretty much the same. So, I guess I'll explain Gran Colo really basically first. So go over a couple of the entry steps, the reward steps, stuff like that. So, Gran Colo tends to be once a month. It is usually anywhere from 5 to 6 days, and the final day is for the finals bracket. There are winners in each time division. The sign-ups for Gran Colo are usually 3 days ahead. For example, this one is the 5th, 6th, and... does it say in-game? I'm pretty sure it does. So 8. So it's actually 4 days. Well, I mean, if you count the AM hours as time you can use, but global, obviously. So 5, 6, 7, and 8 are the sign-up times, and the Coliseum goes on August 9th. We don't know what the exact end date is. Preliminaries? Oh, yeah, we do. So it's the 9th to the 15th. So it's 6 days, with the finals being on the 16th. That just means that everybody that doesn't make it into the final bracket is done on the 15th, and then the finals bracket occurs on the 16th, which is cool. The finals tend to have significantly higher rewards, but those are also just going to be the best of the best. It's going to be the people that won their time zone. So, just going down a little bit in Gran Colo stuff, so there are 2 rankings. And there are 2 ways to get rewards. You have a time slot ranking, and you have an overall ranking, which is kind of where you fall in all 4 servers. You also do get rewards based on life force. I don't know if that's implemented on day 1, but the more damage you do, the more stuff you can get. The bulk of your rewards are going to be coming to your overall ranking. So usually you're going to win, like, gems, charm medals, nightmare medals, stuff like that. They reward in tiers, so it's like 1 to 3, 4 to 10, 11 to 30, 31 to 50, 50 to 100, etc. And these go on up through the top 20,000. Like, even if you lose all your matches, you're going to get something. And the more you win, the more it adds on. So, for example, let me see if I can bring it up. So these are off the Amino app. This is the a lot of the JP explanations. So for your first win, you get like a Nightmare Medal and an SS Nightmare rank. For your second win, you get 2 Nightmare Medals, etc., etc. These are important to remember just because, like, you only get 6 fights. So, or 5. Or, yeah, no. It's 6 fights. So you get 6 fights, and if you make it to the finals, you get a completely separate reward. So these are Nightmare Medals. You can buy pretty much anything in the Nightmare shop with them. You've got your 2 Infinity weapons that are up front. I believe the Spear is in this one too, but I'm unsure 100%. Those are your Nightmare weapon. Those are your Infinity weapon evolving things. You need 1 of these per extra level of evolution. So it's not additive, so you only need 1 every tier, but they cost 150 Nightmare Medals, and if you haven't judged by how few you are getting in general, like, that's first ranking in your division, or overall, so that's it. That's all you get. Those are your Nightmare Medals. That's 200 for first, so keep in mind that, you know, going crazy deep on Infinity weapons isn't necessarily a great strategy. Just because the goal, like, the growth is incremental, the benefit is for hyper whales. Zant was explaining it to me on kind of a real short basis. It's essentially like you have your grid full, you can't go any higher, your cost is maxed out, your level is maxed out, what do I do? Well, your infinity weapons allow you to get an extra couple of hundred, or 1,000 little bits of energy here or there. It's essentially just min-maxing. And that's it. That's the Half Nightmare Gretel. There's a list of all of the ones that were out when the guide came out. Here's a bunch of weapons that may or may not be in anything. You can get experience books. You can get Nightmare evolution materials. You can get Colo weapon, or you can get skill things. Nightmare experience. This is the only place you can get the SR ones. Eventually, and I'm not going to go into this very deeply just because I do not believe that it is actually going to be on launch because it wasn't in JP. There is a pub. Every team is broken up into 1 of 4 teams, and you can bet on certain matches a certain amount of times during. And then there's like payouts of points and stuff like that for post. I do not believe we are going to see this on day 1, so I'm just giving you the basic information on that. So that's it. That's your Gran Colo. So that's your general explanation for your sign up, for your win percentages, for your overall ranking, that kind of stuff. So how do you prepare for Gran Colo? So I'll go ahead and show you the Zen Gang just because we have things at least moderately ready to go. So we've got 4 DPS, over 90,000. We've got all 3 minstrels are over 90,000. We've got Ultra Rare Mars, who just joined up as our DPS. He's at 90. Zahal, who some of you may know, is beasting it at 90,000. This man is going insane. And then we have this. That's it. Our lowest 2 are a Sork and a Cleric at 60,000, but they're pulling their weight, so it's pretty good. So here's the breakdown. So we have 5 DPS, we have 3 Minstrels, we have 3 Sorks, we have 4 Clerics. And even with 4 Clerics, we still run into some healing chokeholds here or there. So when you're going in, you just want to make sure that your classes are kind of spread out. Like even your DPS, if you go in with 5 Breakers, you're going to lose almost every demon. We have 3, we have 1 Crusher, we have 1 Paladin. Mars is moving to Crusher, he just needs another Hammer. So the big deal here is variety. So when you go into, the reason that matters is because you're not always going to get the same demons every day. It's a 6-day period. You can't change your team. So once you're locked in, you are locked in. That is your team for a week. You can change your gear. You can change your setups and stuff. You cannot change your team. If somebody leaves, you are a man down. So make sure the group you are with going into Gran Colo wants to do it, is willing to take a couple of L's, and is willing to sit through the whole 6 days. Like 6 days is a big investment. So like I absolutely understand. But you don't always get a hammer and a sword demon. You don't always get a sword and a sword demon. You don't always get a hammer and a hammer demon. We went 5 days without seeing a sword demon. So, and the combinations on the second half are always correct. So it's always hammer, bow, sword, spear. So those are reliable. It's just the support weapon that changes. It'll either be instrument, staff, or tome. So that's like your big deal. You'll also notice you have to hit these things 75 times, which is a lot. So there's a way to prepare for that. So I'll show you my grid and kind of an example. So that tome's just there because I don't have another thing for it. But the way you want to sort of plan for demons is, now that we know that the demons today are instruments and staves, I only have X amount of instruments. I can't fill a full grid, so the extra slots that I have, I'm going to make sure I have staves. That way I only have 4, but at least I have them to use. Now here's sort of the trick. So you're going to hear some people talk about stocking items for demons. So for the first couple of rotations in Coliseum, it doesn't matter because like they're on a timer. They are vaguely at 16 to 15 minutes and vaguely around 7 minutes. There's 20, 30 seconds here or there where it can be off, but you know for that time's when you want to prepare. So what happens? As a support, and this is less important for DPS, but you can kind of play with it with DPS. So as a support, I want to start Tetris blocking off whatever's coming up. So instruments are coming up. By the time the demon shows up, I want to have at least 4 instruments on my bar ready to go. That way, no matter what comes in the pipe next, I don't run out of instruments. You also want to try to make sure you're refreshed before the demon shows up. This is a timing thing. This always isn't possible. Do not take that as gospel. There have been plenty of times where I've been absolutely prepared for it, and we had like one massive jump of time where I had to like heal people real rapidly, and I didn't have any stabs coming out when I reloaded. So like, don't take that as gospel. Timing is important, but sometimes it is not possible. So if the demon would be a staff demon at 17 minutes, once we got closer to like the 17 to the 16, I would start sort of paying attention, or I would just make sure I was completely drained and ready to start stalking. So the way it would work is, so our first demon is instruments. I would make sure no matter what, I have probably already used my staves and my 1 tome this fight. So when it gets closer to the 16 to 15 minute range, I would make sure at least 4 of these slots are instruments. It doesn't really matter which ones. Obviously, you want to use your more important ones faster because those are where your stats are. Same thing for Sorks. Healers, less so because stabs are stabs, healing is healing. Like it's a different thing. But the way we have done it is that, so we know the second demon is a Sork, is a staff. It's a cleric one. So I would ask our sorcerer buddies to swap in a couple of staves at the end of their grid so that they had something to contribute. Because if you have 10 people doing 1 item, that's 10 items. At 75, the majority of you, to get at least a lead, only need to hit about 30 from the support before the DPS really start taking it over. Because the weapons are going to be the weapons no matter what. Like, it's hammer, it's bow, it's blade, it's spear. Those are just going to happen. So that's kind of a small explanation on how those work. This is going to be pretty important at the higher ends of Gran Colo. Like, and the other thing I want to mention about Gran Colo, I think that's important, is its matchmake rating, your ranking. It's not like it's regular Coliseum where it matches you up with your time zone and roughly somebody you are capable of playing against, although that doesn't always work. MMR ranking, or MMR matchmaking, is funny. So basically what it does is it takes your wins in a fight and it matches you up against somebody with roughly, and this I don't know the math behind it, but I assume they're counting life force, they're counting how many times you cracked the ship, stuff like that. They may not, I don't know. I don't know what they've never really revealed what the point allocation for certain things are. So the important part is that you get X amount of points per match for doing Y amount of things. You are going to match up with people that are similar in point value to you. This is not gospel. It does not always work. If we have learned anything from StarCraft, Counter-Strike Go, Dota, League of Legends, matchmaking rating is not always great at doing its job. So don't expect to be matched up against the perfect team for your bracket every time. Sometimes you are just going to eat shit and get against somebody who is significantly better than you, or you're just going to have a free win by fighting somebody who is significantly worse. These are all possibilities, so don't feel too bad. Like, mechanically, Gran Colo is the exact same as Coliseum, so if you're confident in playing Coliseum, you're already ready. There's no more tips I can give you other than, like, little mechanical stuff. As far as your teams go, your planning, there are techniques for clerics that are called 1-for-1 ratioing, which means every time you heal, you go back in and get that energy ready, because you're probably not going to double heal somebody. The biggest issue with that is timing. You have to be frame perfect on your cast and your AP recovery button. So, like, if you let it go for a couple of seconds, you're effectively just losing healing. This is something to practice. It's not something that, like, I'm going to tell you must happen, but a lot of the higher guilds you're going to see start doing it. Because, like, you don't need to be healing all the time. If there are at least 3 of you, most of your guys should be at 80% health, which gives one of you enough time to go back and heal, or go back and AP recover and then come back and heal. And as long as you don't all do it at the exact same time, so like designate sort of a rotation. Have like a first slot, a second slot, a third slot. And if you're in voice chat, call it out. If you're not, just sort of know that at a certain time or at a certain timing, somebody's going to pop off and come back on. And then it's me, and then it's me. So if you guys need to communicate that, even better. Teams with communications tend to do a lot better because those little things you can work around are pretty good. There is a lot more to one-to-one healing because it requires a specific amount of timing. So I don't want to tell you to like, hey, this is the end-all be-all strategy to getting there. Because it works sometimes. Like, timing is everything. If you end up against a team that's got, like, 2 Crushers and 2 Paladins in it, you're gonna eat shit because of the AoE. Like, so swapping out every one weapon's not necessarily the best plan in that case, because you're not going to be able to mitigate the AoE damage coming in. It is less than Breakers usually, but hitting 2 targets means that you have to heal 2 targets. And unless you're loaded on stabs that do that, it's a little different, so clerics kind of keep that in mind. Minstrels and Sorks, just pay attention to your guys that are in, like, make sure their highest DPS is in the blue. Sorks, that's really my only recommendation. You look at their top 2 guys, and if one of them's AoE, aim for the AoE guy, because your Crushers and your Paladins are always going to, on average, do more damage. And then for Minstrels, always aim for your AoE guys, but like try to keep everybody at a reasonable amount. Like getting people past 10 is hard because of the diminishing returns and the mischances. So you're only going to be able to keep everybody up so well. Defense tends to be more important because the less damage they are taking is the less healing you have to do, which means the healers are prepared more often. But don't discount the amount of a good Crusher hit. Like, a Crusher with 18 attack buff is going to murder somebody on the other team accidentally, because that's just how multi-target works. So, keep these things in mind. Grand Colo isn't as scary as people make it out to be. Is it competitive? Yes. Is it going to be full of whales? Yes. Play it anyway. You get stuff if you lose. Is it better than regular Colo? I don't necessarily think so, but you get Nightmare Medal, so why not? Like, eventually you're going to want those guys. And you're not going to be able to run a half Nightmare job off the rip anyway. Like, how many of you have, like, Alice Paladin is up first. How many of you have a full polearm grid? At least with SRs and Ls. Like, it's almost not even worth doing anything below that, regardless of the boost. But it is what it is, and people are going to do what they want. Some people are going to be running that sweet, sweet half Nightmare and not even read that she kills your stats on Blade and Hammer. So that is pretty much it for the Gran Colo tips and the Coliseum tips. I think we're going to go into more of we've got Zahal's probably going to sit down with us and give us sort of his tips on being a healer at some point, and then I'm going to sit down with another minstrel and do a video on, like, hey, how do you manage your guys? Which is pretty easy. Like, none of this stuff is really difficult, so I don't want you guys to be like, oh man, how are these guys getting so much? Like, sometimes people just do better. Like, and sometimes whales just have higher numbers. So don't, like, statistically, it's going to happen. So that's it. That's the Gran Colo Coliseum tips. Kind of in a nutshell, I gave you an overview of Gran Colo. I gave you a couple of tips for demon summoning, for stacking weapons, for swapping heals versus AP recovery for clerics, and kind of how to double spec your weapons for demons. So, like, if you're a cleric, have a couple of extra instruments if the other demon is an instrument demon. If you're a minstrel, have a couple of extra tomes if the other demon is a tome demon. That kind of stuff. So there's a lot of little things to keep up with. But that's it for me. You guys have a good one. Like, comment, subscribe. If there's something else you want to see us play, if you want to see us stream some more, get us a list of some stuff you want to see. We're hunting for a couple of new games to kind of look at, so if there's something you're interested in, go ahead and leave it on the channel, and we'll go ahead and take a look at it. So, alright, that's it. Y'all have a good one, and don't get miserable.